So back in 2002, a small group of friends and I had recently finished high school. We didn't have jobs and we all still lived with our parents. This was also the time when Warcraft 3 was released, a highly competitive 1v1 strategy game. In a time when we had no responsibility of any kind, this turned into the perfect storm. Throughout that year, we followed a routine of eat, sleep, Warcraft, repeat. At the very beginning of those days, out of our group, I was the worst player. I couldn't win a single game. And I wouldn't just lose, I would get dominated. And I would get so angry, I would bash the keyboard, throw the mouse, and just yell at the monitor. I began to hate the game, and just merely bringing it up in conversation would trigger me. My friends, on the other hand, loved it. Other than eating and occasionally sleeping, playing Warcraft was all they did, which put me in a difficult situation. If I stopped playing, I risked becoming an outcast. If I kept playing, I risked having a stroke. I needed to get better, but it was obvious just playing wasn't going to be enough.
I love how the answer is just get better.
So I tried a different approach. I logged out of Warcraft and went to Google. And I spent weeks reading blog posts, reading strategy guides, and watching replays of high-ranking players. I even went as far as to mathematically graph army compositions. And then things changed. I remember the night. Armed with my new knowledge, I challenged a friend to a match. They enjoyed playing me because it was an easy win and good entertainment when I rage quit. Could imagine. So we played, but this time I won. My opponent couldn't believe it and demanded a rematch. So we played again, and I won. The rest of the group saw this and wanted to challenge me as well. One by one, they all lost. The games weren't even close. I had such game knowledge that I could predict every move they made and knew exactly how to counter it. By the end of the night, it was clear. I had gone from being the worst player in that group to the best. And from that point, I had gone from hating Warcraft to evangelizing it. It was all I would talk about, all I would do. Eventually, my parents told me to get a job. I had a job. I played Warcraft. Sometime after that night, I received a message from John. John was one of Australia's best Counter-Strike players. A different online game. In case you didn't know. He told me of a Warcraft Pro competition. 16 of Australia's best would fight it out in the biggest LAN in the Southern Hemisphere. He asked if I was going to compete. I said, no way. I'm not a pro. I'm not even ranked in the top 100 on my server. There is no way they would give one of those slots to me. John said, let me talk to the organizers. Being well connected, John was able to pull some strings. The competition had one slot yet to be filled. John convinced the organizers to give that slot to me under one condition. I play a trial game against one of the pros who would be competing. If they say I'm good enough, I'm in. On the day of the game, John, myself, and two other friends gathered around my computer. I logged into the game's lobby where my opponent was waiting, and my heart sunk. My opponent was Kinia. Kinia was ranked 1 on the US West server, which made him one of the top 4 players in the world. I then looked at the list of spectators who would be watching the game. I recognized all their names. They were all pro players who I'd been watching replays of. Not only was I about to be humiliated against arguably the world's top player, but everyone I respected was going to watch it happen. And then some text came onto the screen. Ready? I repressed the panic attack and the game begun. For 20 minutes, I fought it out with the best. And then a dialogue box appeared. Kinia defeated. You are victorious. I just sat there like a statue, holding my breath. People behind me lost their shit. Kinia said one thing before he left the lobby. I think he's good enough. As for how the competition turned out, that's another story. What I want to focus on is what happened throughout that year. So I went from having little understanding of how to play Warcraft to expert knowledge. I went from hating the game to evangelizing it. And I went from not being able to win a single game against my small group of friends to beating one of the best in the world. I hated that game because I didn't understand it. I then evangelized it because I understood it inside out and could achieve great things with it. I think a game like Warcraft is no different than any other piece of software. The level of understanding a user has will dictate whether they see it as a constant frustration and a hindrance, or be able to achieve far more than what they could without it. So how do we get a user to go from a beginner understanding to an expert level? We can use something called LX, or learning experiences. LX is a subset of UX, and it is any user experience that teaches. It can be as small as a tooltip or as big as an email that describes a new feature. The chances are you already have LX in the software you work on today. But from what I've seen, these LX, these experiences, are more nice to haves and afterthoughts rather than core to the software product. Why do we need LX? When a software product starts out, it has a small set of features. It's easy for the user to just figure out how to use it. Over time, you get feature requests. The software grows. It becomes more powerful and thus more complicated. At some point, we cross a threshold where it's no longer reasonable to believe that the user can just figure it out. We can make intuitive interfaces, but this will only take us so far. Take Jira, for example. That software has become so complicated and so little of the user experience is dedicated to teaching that people have careers as Jira admins, a profession dedicated to just understanding how to use Jira. People use software to reach a goal. If you're just going to rely on an intuitive interface and not teach your users anything, you're only helping them get halfway there. If you take the time to provide them with effective LX, you're helping them get all the way and maybe turn them into an evangelist. I work for Easy Agile. We're an Atlassian marketplace vendor, and we make Agile plugins for Jira. One of our products is a story mapping app. We wanted to run an experiment on this product with the goal of reducing customer churn. We started by looking into our analytics and formed two groups of users. One group that was consistently highly active and would be closest to being evangelists. I'll refer to this group as the evangelists. And the other group, users who spend little time in-app, most likely don't see its value, and at a high risk of churn. I'll refer to this group as the churners. We made process maps of each group. In this context, a process map is a list of events the user triggers during a session. It tells the story of what the user did while in-app. So for example, if you had a process map of a phone, it might look like this. User unlocks phone, opens Messenger, writes message, sends message, locks phone. These are the process maps of our two groups. You can see that the churners process map is far more linear than the evangelists. The way we were going to measure success for this experiment was to see how close we could get the churner's map to look more like the evangelist's map. The way we're going to do that is target our churner users with LX based on the most popular events in the evangelist's map. Before becoming a developer, I was a teacher. Teachers use something called pedagogy to guide how they teach. Pedagogy is a set of teaching methods that best help students learn. We're going to use pedagogy in our LX to make it as effective as possible. One of these methods is teach what they need to know when they need to know it. This method brought our experiment to a standstill. We realized that when a user signs into our app, we have no idea who they are, what their position is, their roles and responsibilities, what they do day to day. Without that information, we have no idea what they need to know and when. We went around in a loop to try and deduct this from our analytics and complex formula, but we couldn't find an approach that gave a high enough accuracy. So we ditched the data and found an approach that gave an almost 100% accuracy. We asked them. So when a user signs into our app, they're met with this prompt: what is your role? This will start painting a picture of who our users are. And this is where our experiment ends for now. For until we know more information about our users, we can't teach them anything effectively. Thank you.